Hi, I'm Perry Atkinson, General Manager here at The Dove. Hey, check out our other videos and check out our website at thedove.us. Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have with us today Erich Pratt. He serves as the Director of Communications for the Gun Owners Association of America, graduate from Regent University, and has been with GOA since 1990. And we're here to talk to him about a lot of things, but in particular the similarities of what happened in Texas over the cartoon demonstration and what happened in Paris when the newspaper during their publication of a cartoon of Muhammad, and the similarities of both of those events. Erich, good to see you. How you doing, my friend?
Doing real well, Perry. Thanks for having me.
You bet. First of all, thanks for what you do and the work of your organization, and the whole group there. Our very best to you guys and what you do.
Thank you.
And by the way, I'm sure you're aware of what we did in Oregon the last couple of weeks with the new gun bill here, where now those who want to exchange guns among families and friends have to go down and register. Did you hear about that, and what was your position?
I sure did. In fact, we were involved in this fight. Sadly, elections have consequences, and as you know, Oregon's a very blue state, and it was a tough fight. But no, we were opposing background checks. Background checks don't stop bad guys from getting guns. It only works to register good people. And there's all kinds of problems with that system, not to mention the cost of spending millions of dollars nationwide. You know, the last year that we have on record was 2012, where the U.S. government studied this and found that out of 70,000 people who were initially denied, only 44 of them could be prosecuted, because most of them are false positives. And out of that 44 prosecutions, only 13 people were actually convicted and taken off the streets. So all that money to run all those background checks, and out of 70,000 denied, you're only taking 13 off the streets. I mean, you look at the mass shootings that have occurred in this country. A lot of them either submitted to background checks or evaded the background check and simply stole their firearms. So it's a system that doesn't work. I think Oregonians are going to be very frustrated, but realize it's a feel-good victory for the Michael Bloombergs of the world that are just pushing for more and more gun control.
Yeah, well, we'll hold all of our comments later. Believe me, we're reeling with it here. All right, now we've seen two extremes here. We saw what happened in Paris with the newspaper publishing the cartoon of Muhammad, and then of course we had the cartoon freedom of speech rally in Texas. Do you see any differences here?
Oh, absolutely. Texas put on a clinic for how you're supposed to stop terrorism, whereas at the Charlie Hebdo publication, sadly, you know, they there in France have the gun control laws that the Michael Bloombergs of the world can only dream of. I mean, they have background checks. They have licensing. They banned the firearms, by the way, that the terrorists used last January. And yet when you look at these two events, in Texas, it was over in 15 seconds with both of the terrorists being shot and killed by a good guy with a gun, a cop who had a gun on him, used it to stop these terrorists. Whereas in France, you had the unarmed cops fleeing the scene. You actually had an unarmed cop who sadly was gunned down, a lot of unarmed victims who were gunned down as well. And not only was it not over in seconds in France, that whole terroristic event took about 48 hours to finally subdue, and 17 innocent people were killed. So yeah, there's a tremendous difference. I mean, in France, you know, those terrorists didn't submit to background checks to get their firearms. They were still able to get them despite the draconian gun laws that France has. And by the way, people are not allowed to carry concealed in France. And that ultimately is the difference, because here in America, you have the potential victims that are able to shoot back. And that's not only quite a deterrent, that's been very effective. In Texas, last weekend, obviously it was a cop who put an end to it, but there have been many cases, even over the last year, where armed civilians have stopped mass shootings that nobody ever heard about because it was nipped in the bud, because one of the potential victims had a gun. Very dramatic difference.
Well, in America, at least for now, we can still shoot back. Even Franklin Graham made that response over the weekend. He said, you know, we'll treat terrorism because we can shoot back.
He did. I was very happy to see him say that. And, you know, we've seen many examples of this. About a year ago, almost a year ago, there was a doctor in Darby, Pennsylvania, who used his gun to stop a patient who, by the way, had taken his gun into a gun-free zone. The hospital there said no guns are allowed. Of course, that didn't stop the bad guy from carrying his gun in there, and he started shooting people there in the hospital. Thankfully, there was a concealed carry holder, a doctor, who was able to stop him. Police said he saved countless lives, and the list goes on and on. There was a Oklahoma beheading, I'm sure you remember, where one woman was sadly beheaded, but the owner of that food distribution plant was able to rescue another woman who was about to be beheaded, and he prevented a much greater slaughter from occurring. And even on into this year, I mean, just recently, we've seen mass shootings that were stopped because there were people at the scene of a crime who had guns. In Philadelphia, an argument led to a guy pulling out his gun and trying to kill people, including children, in a Philadelphia barbershop. Thankfully, there was a concealed carry holder who had just walked in at that moment, pulled his gun, shot the guy, killed him, and as a result, police said that countless lives, again, that this guy saved a lot of lives by doing this. In Chicago, there was an Uber driver, of all things, who, seeing a guy that was firing into a crowd of people, he hopped out of his, you know, quote-unquote cab and shot the guy, stopped the attack. So these kind of things are happening all the time. It's not just cops like we see down in Texas. It's armed civilians that are stopping these occurrences. But that's what was missing in France. You know, sadly, they've turned the entire nation into a bunch of sheep, and even the sheepdogs they've neutered, by many of them not being allowed to carry firearms. And so as a result, the wolves have a heyday.
The Texas deal now ended up being the first recognized ISIS attack in America. Now, it's not the first terrorist attack, but the first ISIS terrorist attack in America. So in some ways, the war on terror in America now has been unleashed in a new level. Wouldn't that become gun owners' greatest defense?
Oh, absolutely. That is the only way that you're going to stop this, because terrorists are notorious for showing up at a scene, gunning down a bunch of people, and then they, you know, run back into the woods type of scenario. But what happened in Texas is textbook for how you deal with this. And yeah, we're hearing all kinds of accounts that reports perhaps there's a training base in northern Mexico just a few miles from our southern border. Don't know if that's true, but we've heard reports of that. ISIS is claiming that they have already 100 soldiers and that they're recruiting thousands more. And there have been all kinds of reports of Middle Eastern people who are coming across our southern border, some who've been apprehended and handed over to the FBI, and it becomes classified at that point, which tells you that these aren't just ordinary people looking for a job here. So I think that should be of concern to people on the one hand. On the other hand, I think it's just a reminder that people need to exercise their right to keep and bear arms. And, you know, the more and more that people are carrying, we've actually seen violent crime rates dropping. Is very interesting. Just in the last 5 years, the number of concealed carry permit holders has doubled in this country, and yet at the same time, the gun murder rate has dropped 12%. So we're literally seeing more guns, less crime. And, you know, that approach is the death knell to terrorists. They can't deal with that.
You know, Eric, the other thing that happened in Texas was, in a very short time, and that whole incident was over in a matter of minutes, but here is a classic display of the First and Second Amendment together.
Yes. Yeah, people exercising their First Amendment rights, but it's often been said that it's the Second Amendment that guarantees our First Amendment rights, because without being able to protect yourself, you know, you can have a lot of these rights in theory, but that's not going to do much good when there's somebody who's angry at the speech that you are speaking. And so as a result, that Second Amendment, the great equalizer, becomes very important.
Wow. So, by the way, gunowners.org is the website, an incredible resource, and Eric and his team, they just do a tremendous job across the country protecting your Second Amendment rights. Gunowners.org. What are you working on next? What are you looking at?
Well, one of the things we've been, similar to what we're talking about here, is encouraging even more concealed carry across the country. And at the federal level, we're working on reciprocity legislation, which would, if you are authorized to carry in one state, basically you shouldn't lose your right to self-defense once you hit the state border. And right now, there's really a patchwork of laws that exist in the country. And so, sadly, a lot of people wanting to be law-abiding, if they're traveling, they won't carry their firearm with them. And so to offer greater protection, we're working in the House. Representative Marlin Stutzman has introduced legislation that would protect the right to carry anywhere in the country. And then in the Senate, it's a Texas Senator, John Cornyn, who's introduced that legislation. But again, that's going to be very significant. You go back to Oregon, it wasn't background checks that stopped the shooting at the Clackamas Mall just 3 years ago, because that guy actually evaded background checks and stole his firearm that he used at the mall that day. What actually stopped him was Nick Mealy, a concealed carry permit holder, who pulled out his gun, pointed it at the gunman, and then the gunman ended up taking his own life at that point. So, that's the way you stop these things. It's not by creating a gun-free zone where you turn everybody into sheep so they can be attacked by the wolves. No. It's basically by making or allowing as many sheepdogs to patrol as possible. Great example.
Hey, before I let you go, the increased concealed permits, is it true that a vast portion of those are women?
Yes, I don't have the exact numbers on that, but I've been seeing all kinds of reporting on that just over the last decade. Training is up with women, ownership, concealed carry amongst women. Just recently with Mother's Day, we had a lot of women telling us, yeah, we're part of that increase over the last 10 years. So, yeah, there's been a tremendous boom, and I think that's been a real exciting thing to see that, Perry.
Well, Eric, thanks for your time. I know it's tight. We certainly are honored to have you with us. Keep up the good work, and let's stay in touch as these things progress down the road. And thanks again to you and your team for what you do.
Absolutely, Perry. Thank you again so much for having us on. It's a pleasure.
All right. And again, that's gunowners.org. All right, we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.